What if I told you jet fuel isn't the real reason that planes stay in the air and fly? What would you say then? I'm Chad. Welcome to Open Your Reality. This is my conspiracy theory channel, so to speak, where I can talk about anything I want, including the jet fuel hoax. By the way, I've been wanting to make this video for a very long time, and the day has finally arrived. Yesterday, I quit my 9-to-5, so I am free, baby, free to research. Now, I've known about the jet fuel hoax ever since learning about flat Earth. They kind of go hand in hand in some ways, because if the Earth was round, then planes would have to take that into account and kind of fly it pitch down, but they don't. This is one of those very fascinating conspiracies that most people don't talk about. It's very fringe. Now, I'm not trying to tell you that there's a conspiracy, but what I am saying is we should look into it. And that's what we're doing here today. And I'm going to be showing you some video evidence to help sway your decision, so to speak. Now, let's go ahead and put in Exhibit A. This right here is the Boeing 747, the crown jewel of the aviation industry. Been around for about 45, 50 years, maybe more. And it's quite a behemoth. This plane here is said to hold 63,000 gallons of fuel. And where is most of that fuel located in the plane? Well, it's in the wings.
We're being told that fuel accounts for 50% of the airline ticket price. And we're also being told that the Airbus A380 holds over 85,000 gallons of fuel, which is 130 tons of fuel in each wing, or 22 full-grown elephants on each wing, or 16 London red double-decker buses on each wing. Does that make a whole lot of sense to you? You mean to tell me that they're putting 85,000 gallons in those wings? When they pull up to refuel the airplane, they only use a 10,000 gallon tank. And it takes maybe 45 minutes to pump all of the fuel into this plane. Well, why don't we put this into perspective here? So an Olympic-sized swimming pool holds 660,000 gallons of water, and it takes about 4 days to fill up that Olympic-sized swimming pool. Well, have you seen how fast they're dumping water into that thing? It's quite a bit. Now, if it takes the Airbus A380 about 45 minutes to fill up, and it only requires about 8% of what an Olympic-sized swimming pool requires, that hose would still have to be pumping out over 1,800 gallons per minute to be able to fill up that plane with 85,000 gallons of fuel in just 45 minutes. So a fire hose pumps water at half that speed. And if you were pumping water into the wings of a plane with that much pressure, wouldn't it just destroy the wings of the plane? Think about that, guys. They're definitely not putting 85,000 gallons of fuel in those wings. Imagine 85,000 gallons of fuel sloshing around in the wings. You see, this is a military aircraft, and they are storing 9,000 gallons of fuel in the aircraft.
Yes, those thin little wings that can't be more than a foot tall are holding 63,000 gallons. And just to put this in context, your car only holds about 15 gallons, much less 63,000, of which they say up to 52,000 gallons is stored in the wings. So let's say that. The rest is stored in the fuselage in the middle. So, but they're still saying 52,000, that's 26,000 gallons on each wing. And how much does all this fuel weigh? Well, 63,000 gallons weighs about 400,000 pounds. So you got 400,000 pounds of jet fuel. You have the weight of the aircraft itself, all of the cargo, and all of the people. So we're talking a lot of weight here. A lot of weight. And yet this behemoth routinely goes up into the air and flies for 12 to 14 hours at a stretch with no problem. How is that possible?
Jet fuel is a hoax, and airplanes don't actually burn fuel to fly, but rather use an energy source that's going to have you questioning everything. Just a fun theory for entertainment purposes only. So this is a plane. It flies in the air using jet fuel, or so we're told. A typical Boeing 747 carries about 64,000 gallons or 242,000 liters of fuel. That's a lot. A literal metric ton. Actually, about 193 metric tons to be exact. But let me ask you something that you've probably never thought of before. Where the hell do they put it? Like, this is what a 60,000 gallon water tank looks like. That's a person for scale. It's massive. We are told that more than this amount of fuel is stored in the wings of the plane, and that part's not a myth, that's actually what they tell us. And the question people are asking is, where? How exactly do 64,000 gallons fit in these wings? Like, this entire tank is really squeezed into those thin sheets of metal? It just visually doesn't make any sense. And then think about the time that it takes for an airplane to refuel. When you're at an airport, you usually don't see the fuel pump connected to the plane for more than a couple minutes at a time. A regular car takes only about 12 gallons of fuel and let's say 2 minutes to fill up. Even if these jet fuel pumps pumped at 10 times the rate of a regular car gas pump, do the math, and it should take around 9 hours to fill just half of the plane's 64,000 gallon capacity. Yet we somehow never see a plane getting pumped for more than a couple minutes, if even at all. Sure, they'll tell you these jet fuel pumps are actually way more powerful than that and can pump fuel at a rate hundreds of times faster than car gas pumps, all going through this hose with a 1 to 2 inch inner diameter, which is actually how wide they are on the inside. Go search it up. All of this fuel which goes to power the turbines, and this is where it starts getting fun. Because here's what a turbine from a typical airline jet looks like, pretty standard. And here's the ceiling of the Hoysala temple in India, an ancient temple that is said to have been built around 1150 AD, but some argue it could be much older than that. Now, ancient India has some of the wildest temple architecture and design anywhere on earth, like Kailash, a whole last temple that was carved into the bedrock of the cliff around it, an absolute marvel of ancient engineering. The pillars found inside these temples are so symmetrical, so insanely detailed, they look like they're 3D printed, made hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, and also appear to have been made for much more than just aesthetic purpose, because the engineering behind these pillars is nothing short of miraculous, with moving stone parts that can be physically rotated like they're part of a machine. Some of them aren't even connected to the ground, and just how on earth did they pull that off? Meanwhile, others can fully rotate and spin around. Like, we're talking stone pillars built over 800 years ago, engineered like modern machinery.
Very, very interesting, right? You're probably wondering what those ancient temples have to do with the planes. Well, this next clip that I'm going to show you explains that, and it's very, very interesting because we're going to get into now how these jet engines actually operate. Take a look.
So these airplanes don't actually burn jet fuel to fly.
Do the math on a Boeing 747, 64,000 gallons. That's nearly 200 tons of liquid. They tell you it's stored in the wings, but look at the cross-section of a wing assembly. There's barely room for a swimming pool of fuel. And you're telling me they pump all that in 10 minutes. The flow rate alone would melt the valves.
So what's actually spinning the turbines?
Look at the Hoysala and Kailash pillars, precision-engineered stone, symmetrical, some even spin on an axis. They look like precursors to the GA and Rolls-Royce cores. There's a theory that once you hit a certain altitude, you aren't burning fuel, you're tapping into a pressurized atmospheric energy. The fuel is just for the show of takeoff and landing.
Why keep the fuel then?
Weight and balance and control. If the public knows energy is pulled from the air, the global oil economy collapses overnight. Only 3 companies in the world, GE, Pratt & Whitney, and Rolls-Royce, actually know what's happening inside those cowlings.
So there you could see, it seems like it's a logical impossibility that you could fuel up a plane in just 20 to 30 minutes with such a small 1 to 2 inch valve. Now, if this was truly a conspiracy, because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Chad, you're crazy here. Everybody would have to be in on it. But the thing that you don't understand is that there were only 3 companies worldwide, and that's Pratt & Whitney, GE, and Rolls-Royce, that are allowed to make these jet engines. That's it. And you know who is the largest shareholder of these three companies? You got it. BlackRock and Vanguard. That's it. This is a trade secret. Now, this is really two conspiracies in one. It's the jet fuel conspiracy, and it's also free energy conspiracy. And this ties in to Nikola Tesla.
They've kept this a secret for decades. We once had access to free energy, and they've been lying to us ever since. There is strong evidence that Nikola Tesla was about to change our world forever. In the early 1900s, Tesla developed a technology called the Wardenclyffe Tower. It was more than just a transmission tower. Tesla designed it to send electricity wirelessly around the world using the Earth's natural energy. He powered his home and devices without a single wire. But here is where it gets dark. This angered powerful individuals controlling the energy market. J.P. Morgan, who funded Tesla, stopped the project when he saw that free energy couldn't be sold or controlled. And it gets even stranger. Tesla's lab mysteriously burnt down, and many of his notes and prototypes disappeared. Tesla's discoveries went beyond just wireless electricity. He hinted at tapping into what he called radiant energy, a limitless source of power derived from the very fabric of space itself, similar to what modern scientists refer to as zero-point energy. Many say that this is also how the Tartarians were able to pull off so many of their technological and architectural feats.
And if you know how these engines really work, which is compression and free energy technology, then it makes more sense. And we're going to get into that shortly. But just think about this. Imagine if you had 52,000 gallons sitting in the wings of the plane. The wings would be like this, but the wings really would just break right off because 52,000 pounds is equivalent to 30-something African elephants. And African elephants are big. They're 13,000 pounds. They're tall, they're huge, they're so much bigger than us. And could you imagine, say, about 18 of these African elephants sitting on each wing? I mean, the wing, one alone, the wing would probably snap. And how do they put that fuel in there? Where's it going? And how do they get it in there so quickly? It just doesn't make sense. And that's why I started looking into this and I started thinking, you know what? There is something here, because if this conspiracy is true, that means they are lying to us about the way planes fly. And the reason, you might be saying, well, why would they lie to us? Well, the reason is they don't want us to know about this technology, and the oil industry and the rich at the top, they've always squashed anybody that's ever come up with a free energy device. I mean, they take these people out. They take away their inventions. They don't want it out because they don't want to spoil the party. And they've been running this party for a long time now. Tesla tried to give free energy to the world. I read his biographies. He was a special kind of guy. And it's just a shame. Our entire world could have been way, way different than it is now. People wouldn't be as enslaved. We wouldn't have to work so hard. Look at gas prices. Gas prices right now have jumped to $4.60 a gallon. And in a few weeks, they'll probably be over $5. We would never have to worry about that. Imagine how cheap supplies would be, everything would be, if we had free energy. But no, we can't have that.
And Tesla's like, no. Wireless communication, I got that. We're going to do wireless energy. We're going to do wireless free energy for everyone on the planet can just tap into this and just get free electricity. And J.P. Morgan says, well, how do you put a meter on that? J.P. Morgan owned copper mines that made copper wire. He owned rubber farms all over the world that made insulation for the wire. He owned lumber mills and forests that created poles for wire. He owned coal factories. He owned machine shops that created generators for electricity, and he owned railroads that brought all this stuff around the country. Free energy shuts that whole business down. We don't need any of that. Carnegie, we don't need any of that. The Mellon family, we don't need you guys anymore. It's just free. Imagine what the world would be like if energy was just free.
That's the golden age.
Yeah, we're not going to live to see it.
Nope. Wow.
And by the way, I talked about weight before. The A380 Airbus, which is the newest, biggest plane that can carry, I think, up to 500 people, that weighs up to 600 tons. It's truly incredible that something that big can get off the ground. Remember the Wright brothers? They barely got off the ground with their plane. So we're using advanced technology, and they are not alerting the public about it. And I feel it's my duty to spread the good message here, but I'll let you make up your own mind. Let me know what you think in the comments section. Do you agree or disagree with the whole jet fuel hoax conspiracy? Like I said, it's really two conspiracies in one. It's the fact that they're telling us that they're putting all this jet fuel into the plane when they're not. Why? Because they want to make money. They want you to think that the price, the main part of the price of an air ticket is for the jet fuel. And then we have this conspiracy where they're not telling us the actual true technology of how these planes are flying.
What they tell us is they put 10 tons of liquid fuel in these wings of the planes. 10 tons of fuel in these wings, which would look like that in weight. All those, cars piled on those wings would equal the amount of fuel that they tell us that they put in the wings of the planes. And the wings don't tip. They don't, fall down a little bit when they get all that liquid in there. 10 tons. But something's up with that. That prompted me to definitely look into that a little bit more. And it came down to the turbines. And what the turbines do is they pull in the air, which is electrical. Air is electricity, Tesla knew that. Tesla figured that out, pull that atmospheric energy out of the air, and they pull that electrical air into these turbines, which have tuning forks in them. And these tuning forks can be tweaked and tuned right there. And that creates resonance, and that's what creates all that sound when you hear a turbine revving up. It's creating a frequency, which is going to turn that air when it's compressed into a gas, a fuel. So it's just taking the air, the electrical air out of our atmosphere, compressing it, resonating it to a certain frequency, a tone that will make it vibrate, turns it into a gas, bam, there's your free energy engine using the air. And they use that sequence, turn it into a free power engine, and it's an air, because it uses the air, plane, because it flies over a plane. That's my take on the jet fuel hoax, and I can definitely see why they would do that, because they already use free electricity out of the air to power our cities with electrical masts up on top of skyscrapers. Brilliant. So most of this comes down to utilizing free electricity out of the air and charging us for fake fossil fuels, fake nuclear energy fuels. And if they could do it, wouldn't they? Right.
Now, I could be way off. I could be just completely dead wrong. Let me know what you think. I'm sure there's going to be some people out there that are going to state all the science. But you tell me, how does 60,000 gallons of fuel go into every plane ride? I mean, by the way, have you ever seen oil tankers come to the airport? Very few. And think about how many tankers would have to show up. How many planes go out per day? I mean, we're talking massive amounts of fuel. And you might be saying, well, they have it under the ground, They don't have that much. Okay, you'd have to have massive loads of tankers coming one after another every few minutes to fill up. And this is one conspiracy where I have to say, if I had to put it on a scale, if it's true, I would say 95% it's probably true. And maybe I should start doing that at the end of every video, giving it my rating. Heavily, heavily favored towards that. Jets don't use that amount of fuel. They only use a little bit of fuel. I'm not saying they don't use any fuel at all. They use a little bit of fuel just to get off the ground and maybe to land and taxi, and that's it, just to get the engine started. But once the engine is up in the air, it's not using jet fuel, it's using convection. So, we've uncovered a lot today. I hope you enjoyed this video. And by the way, thank you to everybody who was so supportive in my last video when I talked about how I quit my 9-to-5. So, yep, I'm basically tight walking the rope, and there's no net below now, so to speak, metaphorically. But that's okay, because I've done that before, and we'll see where it goes. Think positive thoughts, create your reality, and don't forget to subscribe and like to open your reality. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.
I'm not saying that the plane doesn't use any fuel at all, but they're definitely lying about how much fuel it's actually using. So here's how a jet engine works. The shape of the engine is like a vortex, and as the air goes through, it's pulled into the engine, and the vortex geometry spins the air through the engine, compressing it and sucking the air through, which then propels the plane forward. So the engine itself is literally sucking the plane forward by constantly propelling itself through the medium of the air. And according to the owner's workshop manual, the secondary flow of compressed air accounts for 90% of the thrust produced from a jet engine, which means that the fuel isn't actually being used for much. And look at what this guy did. You see what he did? That's a vortex shape. Simply by getting the spindling thing to move, it is now able to propagate through the medium because of its vortex shape and infinitely propel itself without requiring any source of energy, which is exactly what the engine is doing on the plane. It's pulling the air through and then pushing it out on the other end. You see, the fuel is only used to get the plane engine going up to speed and then for takeoff and landing. But when the plane is in cruising speed, it's fine. And have you noticed how the engines are in front of the wing? If it was really so blistering hot and there was 85,000 gallons of fuel in the wing, why would they have the engine almost blowing directly on the wings? Couldn't it combust all of the fuel? And what about all of these people at this beach as this plane starts taking off? If you really pay attention to what happens, they all seem to be fine when all of that air that was propelled out of the engine is literally hitting them. Wouldn't they be scorched? You see, an airplane engine doesn't actually require fuel once it gets going, because it's literally creating a vortex to where the air is being siphoned through, a massive amount of pressure is created, and then it's pushed out onto the other end, which also cools the part of the engine that is combusting. You see, it's literally a vortex, and the engine is in front of the wing and not under it, so that the vortex can perfectly flow over the wing to create the propagation. But of course, this video was for entertainment purposes only. I have no idea how jet engines are made. I don't know anything about jets. This was all satire.
There's a crack beneath the surface of the day, where the light bends in the quiet broken away. Every face feels like it's slightly out of place, like a memory you can't quite retrace. Time keeps moving but it never feels real, like a loop you're forced to endlessly feel. Every moment slips before it can land, like dust falling through an open in hand. If this is real, why does it fade? Why does it feel already decayed? Maybe this world is just a lie we learn to see. Shapes and shadows dressed to certainty. Every truth dissolves if you look too long. Like a quiet, never-ending wrong. We're just echoes drifting through a frame, calling out, but nothing calls our name. If this is life,